So welcome, we're at Menlo Atherton High School, and this is the 2018 Northern California Regional Conference. All right. I want to begin with really acknowledging you for being here. So this is a Saturday morning. We all drove down here, and it's cold. And it really is a demonstration of your stand for what we're up for here in Citizens Climate Lobby. That we say that it's possible that we have a livable world, and we're willing to do something about it. And you're willing to do something about it. So the conference has been organized and put together, and there's a schedule, and there's speakers, and there's technology, and there's everything else. But the conference only happens because you're here. You are the conference, and you being here and participating is really in that. And I want you to get that you are the conference, and you are the conference. And thank you for being here and making this conference possible. So again, I acknowledge you. Thank you for being here. So some of us are really new to CCL, and some of us have been with CCL for years. So just so that we're all at least on one level, the same playing field, we're going to play the 2-minute video that introduces CCL. So if we could, Tim, go ahead and play that, and then I'll pick up right after that. Thank you.
The climate is changing. Extreme weather is disrupting livelihoods and food supplies around the world. This is observed. This is documented. This is the scientific community's consensus. The climate is changing. Carbon emissions are driving that change. Emissions come from burning fossil fuels. So if we want to slow or even reverse the change, we must lower our fossil fuel use. By charging a fee on fossil fuels and returning that revenue to households as a dividend, we can do just that, starting a chain of positive effects. Fossil fuels become less desirable. Cleaner sources of energy become more competitive. The dividend creates millions of jobs. Carbon emissions go down, reduced air pollution saves tens of thousands of lives, and climate change is brought under control. We can make this happen, but enacting a carbon fee and dividend isn't in our hands, it's in theirs. How do we sway them? What can we do? We can use our voices to express political will and demand action. We must help our elected leaders work together. It's on us to tell them what we want as a group. Because when voices call out together, their impact multiplies. Government can respond to the will of the people, provided we tell the government what we want. And what we want is a livable world. This is what Citizens Climate Lobby works for. To empower citizens to connect with and influence their members of Congress, to spread the idea that each one of us can address climate change. Bring your voice to citizensclimatelobby.org.
All right. So I'm going to begin with a couple, just so we're all clear on what the ground rules are for this room. So this is a theater, and we've graciously been able to use this theater for parts of our conference. And there's a couple rules about the theater. We're really strict there. One of the agreements we're all on is there's no food or drink in the theater, this theater. There's other areas like the cafeteria and other places where you can eat or drink anything you want. Actually, that's not true. No alcohol on campus either. But in this theater, we really ask that you respect that. And I'm looking at you, person who has that like apple in your pocket, and you're gonna like eat it quietly. Or you who has the sunbag chip that you'll slowly open and then slowly eat chips. Or you, person with the coffee cup down there below your seat. Please, if you will, don't do that. And we'll be able to really respect this theater with that time. Are you with me on that? Okay, great, thank you. We'll start and end on time, so please be to the sessions at the time of their start, and that's how we'll roll. And lastly, I'd like to know from you where you're all from. So I'm going to ask you to stand up if you're able when I call your region, so we can get a sense of who's in the room. Okay, so if you are from the South Bay region, you would classify yourself as from the South Bay. Would you please stand up? Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead and sit down. If you are from the Central Valley, yeah. Okay, thank you. If you are from the peninsula, so San Francisco and the peninsula, like all the way to the South Bay. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. Oh, it's me too. If you are from the East Bay, will you please stand up? All right. If you are from Sacramento area or anywhere you define as, Sacramento area. Yeah, all right, thank you. If you are from California north of Marin, Sacramento is part of that as well, but that is it. There we go, yeah. Thank you. And did I miss any regions? What other regions are there? What? Monterey. Oh my gosh, Monterey, stand up. Yeah. How could I? Yeah. Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz is here. Yeah. Wow. Sierras. The Sierras. Oh wow. Okay. Marin. Marin, okay, yeah, Marin, all right, yeah. All right, I don't mean to exclude, okay, and if you weren't included in that for any reason, maybe you're not even from Northern California, will you please stand up? Oh, we got everybody, all right. Oh, here we go. Okay. So as you can see, we're from all around the region, and Northern California is a vast area. Maybe you haven't been to everywhere. I'd encourage you to meet somebody new while you're here. Also, if somebody is new to CCL, please let them know that they're really welcome here. It really makes a difference for somebody when they're welcomed in a place. Okay, so in a moment, I have the honor of introducing our next speaker. But first, I'd like to share how I started with CCL. So we all started with CCL in different ways. Mine was, I was at a luncheon in San Francisco for an environmental cause. So, and this was a big luncheon. Like you can think like a huge warehouse-sized space. There was like 700 people there. It was a gala luncheon. And it was really inspiring. I love the work there. But I walked out of the luncheon to the mixer, the social mixer area, and there's people around. And you got to think. Remember, this is San Francisco at lunch for an environmental cause. So the fashion is good looking, but casual. And I look over to my left, and I see this table there. And behind tables, where people are tabling, usually maybe there's two people in coordinated T-shirts or something. But no. There was a man in a suit standing behind this table, and I thought, what is that person doing here? Just stood out. He's not from a bank, obviously. What is this? So I walked over to this table that had this Citizens Climate Lobby banner and said, well, what are you doing here? What is your organization? And a man named Mark Reynolds looked back at me and said, oh, well, we're Citizens Climate Lobby. We're building political will for a livable world. And we empower citizens to exercise political power in the world. And I was like, oh, okay. And he explained to me about carbon fee and dividend. I was like, well, that sounds great. And I was struck by his presence, and the presence of the organization as one that came to mean business. That's what it really struck me. Now, whatever about Citizens Climate Lobby strikes you. For me, it was like these people really showed up to not just talk about issues, but we have a solution, we're pursuing it, we're going to go do it, and we're going to show up in a way that we mean business. We're going after this. And I was like, that's the organization I want to be part of. And I joined a Wednesday call, and I've been part of the San Francisco chapter ever since then. Yeah. And now I'm at a conference in a suit introducing people. So next, this is Mark Reynolds, the Executive Director of Citizens Climate Lobby.
Yeah, my staff were the last holdouts to stand up. I noticed that, gentlemen. Morning. Thank you for inviting me up here again. I'm very excited. I've been very excited getting ready to come up here. I want to spend the most time on my comments this morning just talking about how important this region is to the overall enterprise. I think it really starts with Tasha as a leader, as being a really strong, great. Tasha gave me this stone with this phrase etched in it 4 years ago. You can't see what it says, but what it says is nothing is written in stone. And, yeah. I mean, you can take for that whatever you want, but I keep it on my desk every day as a reminder that the people who say we'll never be able to pull off the impossible, that's just their opinion. You can do with it whatever you want. That's what I do with it every day. I also want to say something about the organizers. We have 298 people registered for this conference. This may end up being the largest regional conference we've ever had, and it takes a lot to put something like this on, and most of it is not fun. Most of it is this constant sense of dread of all the things that are going to go wrong. You're convinced everything's going to go wrong. It's not so much what you're doing, it's dealing with the dread as you're planning it. So if you had something to do with the planning of this, the inviting people, the logistics, everything, could you just stand up so we can thank all the people who are organizers for this event? Okay, so I want to just talk about some of the people that are so important to our organization. First of all, my two staff, who were the last people to stand up. So Andy Beers is in charge of our foundation grants. And I told my staff I wasn't going to cry in this year's regional conferences. And I'm pretty sure that's just another promise I'm not going to keep. So the largest grant we've ever received in the history of our organization was $500,000. Wow. This year, Andy won $2 million proposals. So, Tony kind of disguises himself as the IT guy. But he's really our strategic thinker in the organization. We do retreats after the conference in June and then the same thing in November, and we spend a day and a half, and what we're always trying to work on is how do you work in an organization that's twice as big as it was this year as last and will be twice as big again next year? Do you have adequate structures? Are you thinking in a way that tries to get out in front of that? And Tony always leads that work, and it's because he's a big, broad thinker. He thinks with broad brushstrokes and is able to lead that process and is really, the stuff that he does in IT is important, but the thing he does in leading us as strategic thinking in the organization is enormous. So Tony's just a really, really remarkable staff member also. Let's give him a hand also. Two of our board members, so we have two boards which I'll talk about when there's the Q&A time tomorrow morning. Citizens Climate Lobby has a board, Citizens Climate Education has a board, and Citizens Climate Lobby has 5 board members, 2 of which are here from the Bay Area, Jerry Hinkle and Mary Selkirk. So can we have them wave so we can see them also? Mary's kind of taken me on of being my personal coach on how to work with boards. So she says things like, would you consider the possibility of upgrading your relationship with the boards from putting up with them to trying to do big things together? I don't know, Mary, that doesn't sound very fun to me. And then she says things like, I want you to talk to the individual board members regularly and develop a personal relationship with each member of the board. And I'm like, what could ever come with developing relationships with people? Who could do anything big that way? So they've both been really remarkable additions to what's happening here. And then this is going to be terrible to start on this because there's so many people that should be named that I'm not going to be able to get to. But Harold Hedeman and Steve Hams created that whole business leaders program. And Marty Roach has been the environmental justice person, running that action team for so long. And Pierre Joseph got both Secretary Schultz and Secretary Chu to join the advisory board. Liz has been running Team Oil. Rob Beggs really got the conservative caucus going for a long time before he turned it over. So this has been a really, really important region. There's more major donors in this region than any other region in the country. So I really want you to know this region makes a huge impact in the whole organization, and it started out that way also. When I came to CCL, there were six chapters, and after I'd been here for 9 months, there were still 6 chapters. And have you ever had the experience of thinking, I'm a pretty productive person, I make a lot of stuff happen, and then don't produce a result, don't produce a result, don't produce a result, and you start to say to yourself, maybe I just don't have it anymore. And we held a tabling event over at I think it's called the George Mason Center. That big building was the same one that Stuart went to the lunch in. And Rachel Guinness from Marin stopped by, Suds Jane, who's here from San Jose, Tony Stein from Berkeley, and some people from San Francisco. We had a group start a couple months later in Lori Williams' synagogue in Oakland, and we started 4 chapters that day. That changed the condition in which this organization happened. It went from, oh my God, we're 6 chapters, we may never grow, to, sheesh, who's got 10 chapters? It's like, we thought we were really big and something, and it actually created a dynamic where it got very easy to add chapters after then. So again, I just want you to know that this region has been and is really, really important to the overall effort. Okay, the other thing I want to get to is this piece. So a year ago, the marketing team came to me and said, so our marketing team was made up of a bunch of people who are like, I went to a marketing seminar once. I read a book on marketing. I'm an expert. And they said, we found an actual expert. And one of the first projects that we want to do is we want to define CCL's values. Now, that sounded fine to me. I'm like, yeah, okay, go ahead, let's do that. But I wasn't very enthusiastic about it, and I didn't think anything would really come of it. But here's what they brought back. Put the first one up, Tim. First of all, we're focused. We are focused on what we see as the single most impactful solution to climate change, a national carbon fee. We know it will not solve the problem entirely, and appreciate the work that our friends and other groups are doing. So that we can be effective, we do not let ourselves get distracted by work that does not support our core purpose. After we accomplish our goal, we will tackle the next most impactful solution. Optimism. We believe that people are good and that democracy works. We are confident that our approach will work because we see progress. We stand for a solution, not in protest to other solutions. We don't expect perfection from ourselves or others. This is a process, and we know that people can improve. Together, we are a community that offers one another comfort, support, and fun as we work. Relationships. We take the most generous approach to other people as possible: appreciation, gratitude, and respect. We listen. We work to find common values, and we endeavor to understand our own biases. We are honest and firm. We know there is a place for protest, but our approach is to build consensus. That's what will bring enduring change. That's why elected officials and their staff, no matter what their politics, say they're happy to see us, and they mean it. Integrity. We are prepared and do our research. We are always on time for meetings. Our approach is thoughtful and thorough. We consult experts and use data. We are open to new information. In fact, we solicit opposing opinions. We refine our solutions to make them better. We follow up when we are asked. We keep on. Personal power. We use our voices to be heard. This simple act transforms us from spectators to engaged citizens and reveals the true nature of democracy to us. We are volunteer-driven, trusting volunteers to make important decisions and to create and develop things that will be valued by Citizens Climate Lobby. Being nonpartisan. Our group is open to all who are serious about solving climate change. You are welcome no matter where you live, what you wear, what you do for a living, or who you voted for in the last election. We work with elected officials and community leaders from across the political spectrum because we believe that everyone is a potential ally. So I think I could see Leslie Beatty, can I? Okay, great. So could you stand up for just a second? Okay, so you know what happens when people misbehave like this in our organization? We hire them. So Leslie's going to be joining the staff next week, and we're really, really happy about it. Okay, I want to talk about how do we maintain this in the face of current circumstances. So I don't know how it was for you, but this is a hard year for me. I found a lot of things very frustrating and oftentimes hard to generate what we would call the CCL way in the face of certain things that happened. So for instance, when a tax plan gets passed and there's no hearings, to me, that seemed like that just flew in the face of what we've been trying to work on for 200 years. It's hard for me to understand what that has to do with what we call democracy. You know, personally, I've had so many great meetings with Paul Ryan, and we've had so many great meetings with him as an organization, but every time he stands behind Trump and smiles with his stupid little Eddie Munster haircut, I just want to strangle him. So I think it's more important than ever that we figure out how do we continue to bring what we call the CCL way to what's happening, because circumstances are difficult, particularly on our issue. I want to read you something that I also read last year, because I think it makes so much sense in the face of what we're doing right now. David Remnick did a series of interviews with President Obama just before he was leaving office, and one of the things he asked him is, what do you tell your daughters when racist incidents happen? You know, there were things that were happening towards the end of that election. And here's what Obama said. He says, what I say to them is people are complicated, Obama told me. Societies and cultures are really complicated. This is not mathematics. This is biology and chemistry. These are living organisms, and it's messy. And your job as a citizen and as a decent human being is to constantly affirm and lift up and fight for treating people with kindness and respect and understanding. And you should anticipate that at any given moment there are going to be flare-ups of bigotry that you have to confront, or maybe inside you and you have to vanquish. And it doesn't stop. You don't get into a fetal position about it. You don't start worrying about the apocalypse. You say, okay, where are the places that I can push to keep it moving forward? Okay, I'm going to ask you to pair up in just a minute, and it might have to be 3 people, and you just make sure that there isn't somebody who's sitting around not able to be included in a group of people talking. And what I'd like you to answer with the people you're talking to is, how do you maintain what we've all developed as a certain kind of, you know, what we'd call the CCL approach that's very much reflected in those values, the kind of human generosity? How do you maintain that in the face of the current circumstances you're dealing with? And I don't expect you to have an immediate, obvious answer to this. Some of you may have to struggle with it a little bit, but it's more important than ever that we're able to maintain what President Obama's talking about here in the face of current circumstances. So we're going to give you a few minutes for that. Make sure you have someone to talk to. Grab the person next to you and say, you're my partner, and go ahead and share in response to that question. One thing I want to make sure is that you forgive yourself when you find yourself, you know, angry or reacting, and that, you know, we're all human beings. We're all trying to bring our best, you know, the best of us forward all the time, and sometimes we'll fail in that. I'm hoping that that doesn't leave you with anything that you beat yourself up about or feel guilty. We're all human beings, and things, we're going to have flare-ups, as President Obama says, of our own bigotry. I want to share with you one person's response, and I don't know if you saw the blog that Joe Robertson wrote on Martin Luther King Day. We also put it in the newsletter. I thought it was worth reading to everybody. It's titled, "We Stand for a Better Way." Our volunteers in Nigeria, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, and Kenya, Tanzania, in all 14 African countries and 6 continents, work hard to be principled community leaders whose efforts foster democratic participation. They work to build better societies, where citizens and stakeholders have a voice in making policy, where human imagination, not the inertia of historical injustice, determines future outcomes. This is not easy work. Volunteers have faced disdain and assault from those who believe citizen volunteers should not have the right to correct against corruption simply for speaking up. One of our local leaders said, after receiving personal threats, "I will not let people driven by fear and anger stop me from working for good. We have a right to a better future, and we have the tools to empower others. We must do this work." For the President of the United States to denigrate the people of these great nations around the world using profound words rooted in bigotry is a disgrace to our national tradition of progress towards an improved and liberated condition for all people. There can be no justification for such insults and no tolerance for such prejudice in any civil discourse. The legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is the best of what the United States is and can be. It is a commitment from the very root of our humanity to rise above indifference, violence, and hate. When he won the Nobel Peace Prize, he described his work as just one part of a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice and to liberate all people from being tragically bound to the starless midnight of violence and hate. To be an American, one not be born here. One need not be born here. One must, however, commit to live in a way that recognizes that all people have an essential human dignity and that no person should ever be denied fair treatment because powerful or small-minded people wish to refuse it. Dr. King believed in, lived, and ultimately gave his life for the cause of universal inclusion, equality before the law, and justice for all people. He defiantly refused to accept that we are mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events we are fated to confront. To be human is to be liberated to make moral choices. To be a citizen of a free society, whatever the practices or preferences of those in power, is to be committed to shaping outcomes so that all people have a fair chance to perfect and express their talents. We are committed to this mission as an organization. Every citizen can build honor-based working relationships with their lawmakers. We work to empower citizen volunteers to do this, so they can, as Dr. King urged all of us to, be personally involved in bending the arc of history towards justice. There's no other way to see the power of citizenships or the meaning of democracy. We must keep moving liberty and justice for all forward, and we must welcome everyone who can help. We will not be defined as a civilization by inhuman acts or bias or vile words. We will be defined, however, by how we respond. We at Citizens Climate Lobby stand with all those who live in their hearts the determination that we cannot allow bigotry to act through our institutions, political or otherwise. We work every day to make sure it is ordinary people, speaking from their own perspectives, who guide the moral mind of their lawmakers. The Republic belongs to the people, and we hold that goodwill between people is sacred. No matter the actions of our leaders, we will continue to work to expand the space in which undivided goodwill is the beating heart of democratic engagement. Joe Robinson's a pretty smart guy. All right, well, again, thank you for inviting me here. I'm really looking forward to my part of this conference. I'll be working with the group leaders and liaisons for a couple hours this afternoon. We're really working intently in that area on developing ourselves and all volunteers to, maximize everybody's potential as a volunteer. I'll have a Q&A session tomorrow morning where I'll include Tony Cerna and Mary Selkirk, one of our staff and one of our board members. So we'll have 45 minutes for open Q&A. I have a little bit of introduction there. And then my last session, I wanted to just see if I could expand your job description a little bit. Because you know how every job you get, when you start the job, they say, well, you have these 5 things to do, and then what happens is by the end of the week, you actually have 10 things to do. And then after a month, it's like 20 things. Doesn't that happen every time you get a job? I still have the piece of paper Marshall wrote me, a handwrote note saying, we need a few more of these groups. And I like to take it into him and say, what does that have to do with me reviewing the liability insurance policy this week? But I want to see if I can expand your job description just a little bit on my closing remarks tomorrow. So again, thank you so much. I'm going to turn things back over to Stuart, who's going to introduce a couple of our board members. Thank you again for having me.
So next, We are going to have Jerry Hinkle and Mary Selkirk from the CCL board share with you about the Citizens Climate Lobby board. So please join me in welcoming Jerry Hinkle and Mary Selkirk.
Hello, everybody. We just want to take a few minutes to introduce you to the two boards of CCL and Citizens Climate Education. We'll have more time tomorrow and tomorrow morning for some more Q&A if folks have questions about the boards. I'm just going to say a little bit about the origin of your boards and what we've been up to, and then Jerry's going to talk more specifically about the role of the CCL board. So, as you know, this organization has doubled in size in the last 10 years. When Marshall started it, as soon as you incorporate as a nonprofit, you need to have a board by IRS regulations. So, like most nonprofit and founder-driven organizations, the original board members for CCL were largely friends of Marshall. So, we're in the process now of becoming much broader and much more reflective of not only our CCL community, but also the community that we want to develop going forward. So for the first time this year, the two boards met in a joint retreat before the Congressional Education Day in November, and really cemented our working relationships and affirmed the core values and did some good work together then. Our focus for the coming year is to expand the CCL, the Citizens Climate Education Board, to be more diverse and to look more like the country we live in. So that means increasing our diversity, both racial diversity, ethnic diversity, geographic diversity, political diversity, et cetera. So that's going to be a pretty strong focus of our organization. But I just wanted to share a story with you before I turn it over to Jerry about how, Mark always says CCL welcomes everyone because you never know who's going to walk in the door. So Lee and I and Harold Hedelman were doing a talk at Berkeley Buddhist Fellowship on Thursday night in Berkeley. So after the session was over, this tall young man walks up to Lee and says, my dad's a real strong supporter of your organization. And Lee says, well, who's your dad? And he says, Bob Inglis. And have you heard of him? So, and this is the guy, this guy is Rob Inglis, who's in his mid-20s, and he was the one who said to his father, if you don't start working on climate change, I'm not going to vote for you. So, and as you all know, Bob Inglis is one of the founding advisory board members of CCL. So who knows why a South Carolina congressman has a son living in Berkeley, but that's the way our world is. Anyway, just wanted to, I'll be around tomorrow morning as well to answer more questions, but one thing I did want to say about that Jerry and I wanted to emphasize is that the reason we have, there's the sort of the legal reason why CCL has to have governing boards. The IRS requires it. It requires them to be two separate boards. But we are also, certainly on the CCL side and on Citizen Climate Education, there are a number of CCL volunteers who are board members. So we are always wanting to be very embedded in the growing and evolving work of the organization. So just to say that we are all interested in hearing from anybody at any time about any concern you have about, or anything you particularly love or excited about that you want the board members to know about. So as part of the joint retreat that we did last fall, we did a series of conversations with about 30 volunteers from all over the country to really kind of ground the retreat in the voices of the volunteers, which we called them listening sessions. And in my experience, it was phenomenal to hear from CCL volunteers from Maine to not Alaska, but the far southwest and the far southeast, and Texas, and all over the country. It was pretty powerful. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that and turn it over to Jerry.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, to underline that, you know, in the corporate sector, the board of directors represents the stakeholders. And you are our stakeholders. We are our volunteers. We go as far as you take us. And so it is a commitment of the board that you feel heard and listened to, and that if we can provide a service to you, we want to do that. That's a lead into what I want to tell you a little bit about the CCL board. And I'll just throw this out now. So if you've got questions after this is over, jerry@citizensclimate.org. You can send me a question and I'll do what I can. I don't know if you have a corresponding email, so send them to me, and if it's for Mary, I'll forward it along.
I just have a regular email.
Just Mary Selkirk. So the CCL board was designed as a policy board with the thought in mind that we would get legislation at some point, and almost certainly it would deviate in some way from the CCL policy that we had forwarded to you, that we'd gotten you enthusiastic and that you're advocating based on. Okay, so what do we do with these policy deviations? There may come a time when we need to take a policy position. Staff will be responsible for taking any change in policy position should we support particular legislation that differs slightly or differs greatly from. But they want that to have a strong rationale and support for that. And they will take any such position in consultation with the board, and we are here to help rationalize and support that decision and communicate that to the members, the people that we represent. And so in doing that, CCL has a cadre of incredible experts, right? Experts in climate policy, science, law, economics. We decided to begin to build this body, and so we've developed something called the Board Policy Network. It's got 2 teams, and if you know of anyone that has such expertise that may want to contribute, please let me know. Again, jerry@citizensclimate.org. But there's an economics team. We've got 9 economists on it, and a science and energy policy team with 4. Dana Nusatelli is here. He's on the science team, and Bob Archer may be here. He's on the economics team. So we're building this to enhance the expertise that we utilize, and one of the things that we want to do, once legislation comes out, we're going to have a thick job to do, right? We're going to be on the run with that, unless it looks exactly like ours. Unlikely. But so what we want to do in the meantime, again, to serve members, is we want to provide cogent educational material that supports our advocacy. And again, if you've got ideas along those lines. But for example, on the economics team, we're not asking the people that we're asking for endorsements, and we're not asking you to be guinea pigs, right? Our neighbors to the north, British Columbia, have a very successful revenue-neutral climate tax, and it's popular, and it's up to $30 a ton Canadian, and it's going to $50. We want to tell that story. Okay, and we want to hand it to you in such a way that it emboldens, it empowers your advocacy efforts. Another, as an example, turns out globally, carbon pricing is really taking off. Okay, and it's up to a carbon price now is subject, or over 20% of emissions globally are subject to a carbon price now. So this is good news. This emboldens our story. And so we want to be able to provide you with that information that really enhances your advocacy efforts. So that's something we're doing to serve y'all. Yeah. That's it. And I guess we'll take questions tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Dr. Stewart.
All right, and next we have a special guest. This is Holly Newman, who's a senior here at Menlo Atherton High School and is very politically involved. And she's going to be sharing some of her ideas on political involvement. So please join me in welcoming Holly.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Stuart. I am a senior here at Menlo Atherton, and I spent the second semester of last year working as a page in the U.S. Senate. If you're like most people and have no idea what a page is, picture a medieval errand boy in a tacky polyester suit. Despite the questionable wardrobe and a work schedule that was hectic beyond belief, I came away from that experience with an enduring passion for politics and a knowledge of policy issues that informs my research and academic pursuits now and into the future. I wish everyone could have that chance, that front row seat to democracy, because besides learning the lunch orders of all 100 US senators, I learned that our government is nowhere near as broken as it appears from the outside. I know that's hard to hear right now. But liberal or conservative, college intern or senior staffer, the vast majority of people in our nation's capital are sincerely trying to make a difference and help people every day. I know you think I'm crazy now, and the political environment right now is pretty frightening. But the solution lies not in social media wars and antagonism, but in long-term efforts to promote significant policy change. I want you to remember that politics is not what you see on the news. It's not all inflammatory tweets and gridlock. Mostly, it's things that can't be sensationalized. It's real people doing real, positive, bipartisan work that we don't see splashed across every newspaper headline, but in the long run, makes a profound impact. That's what we're doing here at the Citizens Climate Lobby, tackling issues head-on with a commitment to shared values, sustainable change, and collaboration across political lines. My experience in government may be singular, but it taught me a mindset that we can all adopt, a mindset of commitment and optimism. You've heard it before, and you'll hear it again, but the solution to this political chaos we've worked ourselves into is working together in earnest. Now, I wish I could be introducing U.S. Representative Anna Eshoo, but as you've all heard, the government has shut down. I was watching C-SPAN till midnight last night. So instead, I will be introducing Karl from the CCL, who will be reading a letter from her. Thank you all very much.
Isn't she amazing? Wow. I think it's a curtain call, Holly. Well, so thrilled to see everyone here. Thank you all for coming. My name's Karl Danz. I'm liaison to Representative Anna Eshoo, based at Silicon Valley North chapter. And as Holly already told you, and you probably already figured out, that circumstances in Washington absolutely precluded Representative Eshoo from flying back last night. And she's very disappointed. I got a call from her office maybe 10 o'clock yesterday morning, kind of giving me a heads up, we're watching everything, but be prepared, there's a chance that she won't be able to come. And that was fantastic. I mean, talk about relationships and, everything that Mark talked about, and it's all about building relationships. That was so helpful, because now we had some time to start thinking about Plan B, right? So we're going to have some great content for you right after I finish reading this letter. But that was fantastic to have that relationship, here's a heads up, later in the afternoon, okay, it's confirmed. And attached on that email that I received yesterday afternoon was this 2-page letter that, when I get a chance to read it in a minute here, you're going to realize there was a ton of thought that went into this. This isn't oh, sorry, I couldn't join you, have a nice conference type of letter. So yeah, she's pretty amazing. So I'd like to acknowledge Representative Eshoo, for being a close ally and for, doing everything she could to get here. I'm convinced she would have taken a red eye if it had been possible, but instead we have this, and I'd like to read it to you now. Okay, dear members of Citizens Climate Lobby, thank you for inviting me to join you today at your annual Northern California Regional Conference, and for the privilege to have worked with CCL from its inception. I so regret that I'm unable to be with you in person due to the impending shutdown of the government. Well, she wrote this yesterday. And the need to be present in Washington, D.C. to vote on what hopefully will be an agreement so a shutdown can be avoided. I want you to know that your work is more important now than ever before. The President's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement and the repeal of the Clean Power Plan represent a stunning abdication of American leadership. This is further complicated by a majority of the congressional majority of the congressional majority, I had to read that twice, that deny the realities of climate change as we witnessed the massive hurricanes that were amplified by abnormally warm seas and terrible wildfires across California, including the Santa Cruz Mountains in my congressional district. Thank goodness there are some members from across the aisle who recognize the seriousness of climate change. I'm a founding member of the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, a group of 66 members split evenly between the two parties that are dedicated to these issues. The formation of the caucus is an important first step, but Congress should not delay taking real action to reverse the impacts of climate change because time is not on our side. And if you've heard Representative Eshoo in town halls or public speaking, you notice that she often repeats things, so I'm going to repeat that one. The formation of the caucus is an important first step, but Congress should not delay taking real action to reverse the impacts of climate change because time is not on our side. A group of 66 members is a strong voting bloc, and we should make ourselves heard. Last year, the caucus successfully defeated an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, you might know that as the Perry Amendment, that would have halted a study on the long-term effects of climate change in the military. All but one member of the caucus voted against this amendment, and this has given me hope for the possibility of bipartisan action on climate change in the future. Since its formation in February of last year, it was the year before, but that's good, the Climate Solutions Caucus has held several meetings to examine coastal resilience, the impacts of climate change on tourism, and other issues, but it has not introduced or endorsed any legislation. The Republican co-chair of the caucus, Representative Carlos Curbelo, has said the caucus will focus on mitigating the effects of climate change before turning to its causes. You can really sense her, like impatience, like, I want something to vote on here. Given the urgency of this issue, it is my hope that the Climate Solutions Caucus will endorse a carbon tax or other price on carbon, such as a cap and trade system. As you know, CCL's plan to create a $15 per ton tax on carbon emissions that increased by $10 per ton each year would reduce carbon emissions by half over 20 years. And, very importantly, the plan would not slow our economy. In fact, an independent study commissioned by CCL found that it would lead to a slight increase in employment. I just gotta love that she's like reading back the results of the Remy study. I fully support placing a price on carbon. In 2009, I helped draft landmark climate legislation that would have created a nationwide cap and trade program for carbon emissions. This Waxman-Markey, I'm sure most are familiar. The bill passed the House of Representatives, but it was never considered in the Senate. However, because Republicans are currently the majority in the House of Representatives, any legislation to impose a carbon tax must be introduced by a Republican to have a chance of passing. I'm also a co-sponsor of the 100 by 50 Act, a reference to 2050, which requires 100% renewable electricity nationwide by 2050. I had to look up that bill because I hadn't heard of it, but it's a good one. It's all Democratic co-sponsors so far, but California is a leader in the transition to renewable energy and will be powered by 50% clean energy by 2030. But we need a bold nationwide commitment that sends a message to energy markets that the future favors alternative sources of energy. Because the caucus will not introduce or endorse any legislation that is not supported by every member, I encourage you to work with CCL chapters in the congressional districts of Climate Solution Caucus members to push for a carbon tax. This is fantastic. It's important for members of the caucus to hear directly from their constituents about how important this issue is to them. I thank each of you for everything you're doing to promote sustainability in our communities, and my only ask is that you keep fighting and keep making change. My promise to you is that I will continue to fight in Congress because we must win this challenge to protect our planet from the existential threats we face. Thank you again for inviting me to join you and for your superb work. Most gratefully, most is underlined twice, Anna Eshoo, Member of Congress. So as you can see, she not only really wanted to be here, but she's fully on board with what we're doing. She understands the proposal. She's now a champion for it. I'm convinced that when she gets a chance to talk to, Republican members with whom she has good relationships, she's talking about this stuff. So we have a strong ally in Representative Eshoo, and she would have loved to have been here, but I'm so pleased that she put all this thought and time. You can imagine how hectic yesterday was, and somehow she and the staff worked and created this beautiful 2-page letter. So thank you for allowing me to read it on her behalf.